The business challenge had started. After 4 years of ups and downs, one day in July 1987, when I was in the middle of drawing lambs for market, the landowner unexpectedly turned up announcing that I had until Christmas to buy him out of the partnership, or the farm would be sold. A saying of my late father then came to mind: never sail on two types of ships, relationships or partnerships. The partnership was at an end, and I was due to get married in 6 weeks' time. I have to say that I've been sailing on both ships for the past 25 years with the same person. Anyhow, with the help and advice from several quarters, we completed a deal on Christmas Eve, and I'd now started farming completely in my own right. Business challenge continued. The next business challenge was being a contributor to Nigel Lawson's policy of shadowing the Deutschmark. This was a time of very high interest rates, which came very quickly after setting them up on my own. It persisted until Black Wednesday, but it took us another 4 years to get over it. Today, when we have interest rates at 300-year low, it can easily be said that you haven't lived until you paid interest at 18%. In late 1991, we had had 4 years of our noses stuck to the grindstone. Francis was out at work, and I was a one-man band. Financially, we'd stood still, and had even gone backwards, eating into capital. For every pound we'd earned, 25 pence was going out in interest payments. This sort of time Mark referred to as the yuppie boom, I think, in his talk. I've never considered myself a yuppie at all, but there we are anyhow. Anyhow, 1992 was a real reality check for us. It was a pivotal year. We went to view a smaller farm on the Scottish borders where we thought we could downsize and become a little less geared. I even applied for a couple of jobs and attended an interview. After a second interview, it got down to just the two of us for one job. I then came home, and my wife and I had to make a decision about what we wanted from life and where we were going. In the end, we opted to stay put, batten the hatches down and ride the storm out. This was the farm we knew, and we pumped into it everything we had. But in 1992, a series of events started to turn the tide for us. My father-in-law died suddenly at the age of 61, that meaning I immediately had another 1,000 acres of arable land to manage in Nottinghamshire. A phone call one evening led us to being offered 500 acres of grazing on a nearby stud at Royston that was being developed. We were given 24 hours notice before it was going out to tender. I accepted it on that phone call. Lastly, in September 1992, there was Black, or as farmers called it, Golden Wednesday, which took the pressure off interest rates and lifted commodity prices. Stocking the grassland for us at this time wasn't feasible. To get together with the capital costs of acquiring the sheep, we were in an era of production quotas. Running sheep without quotas wasn't an option either. I decided to offer an agistment service for sheep farmers from the north of England and the borders. They supplied the sheep and the quota, while we did the work and supplied the grazing. At this time, we desperately needed to expand our business to spread our costs. Arably, this wasn't really possible owing to severe competition in the area, where there's almost every farmer was seeking to take on more land and consequently high rents were being tendered. But grassland, there was little competition. We were the only farmers in the area with stock knowledge. After a few years of running the agistment service, we were able to expand our own flock and lease quota in. Initially, we bought draft cast ewes from Wales and ran them on lease quota. Later, we purchased younger lowland sheep to help build the structured flock we have today. 1992 marked a turnaround in our farming fortunes and began a long period of growth in our business, which continues to this day. We've achieved expansion by contract farming agreements, managing the farm in Nottinghamshire, stubble-to-stubble contracting, a partnership with a landowner, which on his death became a life tenancy, and various parcels of land we have on short or gentlemen's agreements, and in 2003, purchasing a farming company. At the end of the day, the most important thing for me has been about forming and building relationships. I've never taken on more work or more land by simply being the top money or the cheapest. I have many landlords now who all have different aims and requirements and have to be treated individually. I have to find out what they want, what they expect, and what makes them tick. However, through this period of expansion in the last 15 years, and at the present time and going forward, what has been the business challenges and barriers to expansion and business? They're factors we can't manage or control. Animal disease outbreaks. In 2001, we all lived through foot and mouth and were affected in different ways. Then there was a blue tongue virus, which caused problems down for us in the southeast. A few weeks ago at home, we scanned our ewes and looked set for another crop of good lambs, congratulating ourselves on only having 16 empty sheep in 2,500. Since then, the Schmallenberg virus has come to light. We're a week off lambing 2,000 ewes and all approaching it with some trepidation, as we've already heard of many cases in the southeast. But whatever happens, it's going to be beyond our control. On the weather, yesterday there was a drought summit. At the moment, it's not so much a north-south issue, but more of a west-east one. We're happy to work around farming our light soils with only 410 millimetres of rain in 2011. And as Caroline said this morning, another dry season in prospect. After a series of dry seasons, we've taken positive action by stop growing winter wheat on our most drought-prone land, advancing our lambing dates, increasing creep feeding to get the lambs away before the farms burn up. Labour supply and skills shortage. When I was at Harper, there was a 2-year waiting list to get on the agriculture course. The college was full of aspiring young budding farm managers, and it was not unusual for advertised jobs to invite over 100 applications. This changed over the next 20 years to the point that finding suitable labour with relevant skills became a barrier to my expansion. I now feel we've turned the corner with more young coming into the industry again, wishing to make agriculture a career. Much of this, I feel, is due to shedding the negative image that farming has gained for itself. Much of this negativity has been bred within the industry itself, with its own participants doing their best to run the industry down, even to the point of congratulating themselves when their offspring found a career outside farming. Whenever anyone's purchased land, it's always been dear. Farming has always been hard to get into, and perhaps it may be the hardest now it's ever been. But I feel there's a lot more positives about now. Interest rates are at a 300-year low. Production quotas, which acted a barrier to my expansion due to their capital costs, have been phased out. There are more opportunities for new entrants today as the labour shortage has bitten and a growing demand for skilled technicians and managers has arisen. My 2,500 ewe flock in Cambridgeshire continues to run and exist on the basis of bribing Scotsmen to move down here and look after them. I've got 2 full-time Scotch shepherds at home who will be joined this weekend by 4 more for the main lambing. I do hope they get on. Many people wonder how I've managed to grow in business with all the environment work we do. As an enthusiast for environmental and conservation work, it has at the same time had to make business sense as well. Having spent the first 15 years of my life living in the middle of a town with a garden smaller than a tennis court, I've really come to appreciate the privilege of space and freedom that living out on a farm in the countryside affords. Much of the land we farm now was made available to us because we could offer people mixed farming with an environmental agenda as well. I took the decision 10 years ago to remove the 10% least profitable marginal off-lying and awkward land from reduction and to place this in environmental schemes where they produced a fixed income. This was achieved with the help of GPS mapping. As Marek said earlier, we participate in 17 live stewardship schemes at the moment. And I have to say, you have to be passionate enthusiasts as the paperwork, constantly changing Natural England staff, boom and bust budgets, changing scheme rules and options would and still actually drive one to despair. Sorry, Paul, that's your second dig today. I've been producing cereals to conservation grade standards for the past 25 years and supplying the majority direct to Jordan cereals. As well as the crop contracts, we have tried to protect ourselves from price risk and volatility where practical and economic. I've had mixed success in the past with fixing single farm payments, managing to gain a bit on my own while losing out on my mother-in-law's single farm payment. I used options a few years ago when they could be bought for £2–3 a tonne, but at today's level of £7 to £8, I feel they're prohibitive. On the cost side, it's been more difficult to achieve protection and reduce risk, but progress has been achieved by controlling machinery expenses. Faced with burgeoning running costs, we have moved to a system for our principal items of machinery of fixed price warranties and fixed price servicing over the period that we own the machine. Banking. In 1990, when interest rates were at their peak, I was being hounded by the bank, culminating in my overdraft rate being put up to 7% over base. After a well-spent day visiting the head office in London, this was mysteriously reduced to 3 over base. After that, I vowed that I wouldn't get myself into a position, I would get myself into a position where the bank banked with me and not the other way around. But it took another 10 years to achieve that. Single farm payment. This is neither the place, nor do we have time to talk about my 8 years of trying to sort out my single farm payment. But expanding at the wrong time and participation in environment stewardship led one to being somewhat disadvantaged. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope this has been a warts and all account of my ups and downs in the farming world. Looking back, I think the key things that have helped me in dealing with the challenges that have arisen while trying to build up a business have been determination and bloody-mindedness, trying to be entrepreneurial, business and commercial-like at all times, not taking your health for granted, being a people person building up relationships, have a self-deprecating sense of humour and humility. You can judge that for yourselves. Anyhow, thanks for listening, and particularly best wishes for all your farming endeavours in the next year.
Can I say thank you very much, Robert. That just highlights how to deliver the business challenge. 30 years in the industry, you talked about how you started farming, the high interest rates. I can resonate with all that in our business all them years ago. Black Wednesday, how you turned that became Gold Wednesday. But you've grasped all your opportunities along the way, and you've built up some tremendous working relationships with landlords. And you've highlighted the sheer determination and passion and the positive outlook that you have towards farming and people, and that must be an inspiration to all the young people in this audience today. So thank you, Robert, very much, and I can just sort of second the professionalism and the standard of farming that I saw at Thrift Farm when I had the pleasure of driving around with you last summer. Now we will open up to questions. I have two questions being presented to me. One is from Andrew Brown and Connor Colgan. Connor is a member of our Next Generation board within the National Farmers Union. So could Andrew and Connor please go to the mic and place your questions? I think I'll call Andrew first then. Over to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Marek. This is a question for Mark and Sean, really. It's about overseas development and increasing yields in developing countries. Do you think there's any point in us helping to increase yields in developing countries without first improving their infrastructure? Is it irresponsible to give false hope to a hungry population only to see the extra rot because of a lack of trucks, storage or decent roads? And will these developing economies become a threat to our own ultimately?
Thank you, Andrew. Mark, do you want to pick that one up first? Increasing yields in developing countries, is there any point?
Developing countries will, hopefully will grow more food and grow more of their own food. I mean, the answer to feeding the world's population is not for you guys here to be feeding them. The answer is for them to be feeding themselves. There's a lot of people in this industry, in this country, bemoan our lack of self-sufficiency, don't wish the same thing on other people. The biggest challenge this industry faces is to improve yields and improve production and improve the supply chains in the developing economies, and to make it possible for those countries to feed themselves at an affordable price, not at vastly inflated prices. That's the biggest challenge, and that will mean addressing supply chains as much as production, technology, and water use, and all the rest of it. It means making sure that most of it isn't rotted or lost before it gets processed, and I think that is a critical challenge.
Thank you, Mark. Sean, do you want us to comment?
Yeah, I mean, I would just maybe slightly differently from Mark. I think broadly he's right. It is the challenge is to get other countries to feed themselves, but I think it is almost a bit of both. I think there are opportunities absolutely for Europe and for the UK to export more as well. What we're going to see is we're going to see more trade, and they're certainly going to see more imports probably coming in from Asia. And I think the flip side to that has got to be the UK looking for export opportunities abroad. And I think there's a number of places those can come, but one of them does link back to the question about yields and infrastructure, because I think it's absolutely right. I mean, I think you do have to try and increase yields in other countries where there clearly is the potential to do so. It's very unfortunate if they haven't got the infrastructure and the wherewithal to be able to get that to market properly. But that is yet again another opportunity, I would say, for places like the UK and developed countries, because where we have got the wherewithal, particularly with the fairly developed supply chains that we have in places like the UK, that is the sort of expertise that we can take out and try and sell, either sell or give into countries depending on whether it's aid or whether it's trade.